In the text we are studying, Sri Aurobindo has described the use of concentration by a series of stages, intensifying the concentration, leading to the samadhi. And the samadhi, as it is normally understood, is a state in which we are entirely immersed in the silence of that. The concentration itself is a process by which we disengage our consciousness, which is spread out, and gradually narrow the focus, turn it inwards, and then immerse ourselves in the samadhi. This being the goal of the normal process of the yoga of knowledge, Sri Aurobindo now places the whole activity in the context of the integral yoga, where he says the aim that we have set ourselves is different, and the difference is that it is less exclusively positive of that, less exclusively negative of the divine manifestation. So it is first said in a very general way as a correction. If we take the goal set in the traditional path of the yoga of knowledge, the shift from there to the goal set in the yoga of integral knowledge and the integral yoga itself, the shift is stated only by a slight correction. At the highest, a slight correction is enough to have massive ramifications all the way down to the lowest. So the beauty, the skill of Sri Aurobindo's description is that he begins with this slight correction at the top and then follows the whole chain down, and then we see a completely different picture. We see here not only the skill of his vision, the power and precision of his articulation, but also something which has a subtlety of the mind of a poet and an artist. And so with a slight shift of the shade, a slight stroke of the brush, suddenly the whole picture acquires a very different character. Less exclusive of that, meaning we also include the rest of the cosmos. Less exclusively negative of the divine radiations, meaning we accept the divine radiations. And by making a slight shade, we still see that the divine radiations are radiations of that. That is greater, that is transcendent, even of the divine radiations, but this also is an expression of that. It's a slight shift. And then he begins the series, the chain which follows. We must aim at the highest, the source of all, the transcendent, but not to the exclusion of that which it transcends. So when we say, just as an analogy, the king as the ruler transcends the norms that the people are bound to. But in the very act of transcending, he is there to transcend something which he has to preside over and to ensure that it is properly followed, properly realized. So transcendence does not mean abandonment. It means to stand above in freedom, but the freedom of standing above is precisely the state from which the rest of the conditioning unfolds. So we should aim at the transcendent, but not to the exclusion of that which it transcends, because without that, the transcendence is irrelevant. Rather, as the source of an established experience and supreme state of the soul. So this is the experience, the highest experience from which transforms all the other states. and remolds our consciousness of the world into the form of its secret truth. So now suddenly, once we have recognized that there is a little more, it's not just the transcendence, there is also what is transcended. This now becomes the reference against which all the rest now has to be recast. This becomes the source from which the whole manifestation can be reshaped. And already the big picture is beginning to change. And then the next step goes a little more, facing and accepting the universe. We do not seek to excise from our being all consciousness of the universe, but to realize God, truth, and self in the universe as well as transcendent of it. So the goal is not to cut out and throw out the universe. That's the word. The word excise is to cut, remove, and eliminate, disconnect. That's not the goal. Rather, we realize God, truth, and self in the transcending, but also in the universe, because God is everywhere, truth is everywhere, self is everywhere. And so we are still seeing a continuity from the transcendent into the manifestation. And that continuity is still the goal that we had set, the divine, the self. But now it is including the universe also. So one more degree he moves. We shall seek, therefore, not only the ineffable, but also his manifestation. And what is his manifestation? So the first step, when we see the manifestation of that which is ineffable, meaning you cannot describe, you cannot articulate, you cannot express. And yet there is a manifestation which is expression. So what is the relationship of the two? It's a very interesting passage. He's actually going down step by step the whole journey of manifestation. So in the way it is described from a philosophical point of view, the divine is beyond all description, beyond all knowing. But when he chooses to know himself, he can know himself. And what is the way he knows himself? He knows that he exists. And his existence is sheer consciousness, and his consciousness is sheer bliss. And you have the Satchidananda. That is the highest way of knowing that which is unknowable. Because that is how he knows himself, although he still stands beyond that unknowable. So, we shall seek not only the ineffable, that which is unknowable, but also his manifestation as infinite being, consciousness, and bliss, the whole Satchidananda. And this Satchidananda not only exists in its purity, standing above as an essential principle, but also pours into manifestation in a whole play. So we have to know Satchidananda not only from that station above, standing above and embracing the universe, but also entering it and at play in it. So now bit by bit, he is adding the details of how the whole universe emerges. And then, for that triune infinity is his supreme manifestation, and that we shall aspire to know, to share in, and to become. Not only we know, but we enter and participate, we unite, and that is his supreme manifestation. So the manifestation is not something which is not divine, it is his manifestation, it is himself. That is the Satchidananda. And so we must become that when we seek to unite with him. So you see, now we started with something which was, yes, we have to realize the highest, but the moment that slight correction is made, that the highest is not separated from, all this chain follows. And bit by bit, the very process by which the divine manifests now is taken up step by step and included in the realization. And so one more step from there, we come down. And since we seek to realize this Trinity, not only in itself, but in its cosmic play, we shall aspire also to knowledge of and participation in the universal divine truth, knowledge, will, love. Because in the play, these are the forms, the secondary manifestations of the divine. How do we know the divine in the domain of separation of forms? Precisely these: truth, knowledge. So there's a divine truth, there's a divine knowledge, there's a divine will, there's a divine love. And these things, although not overt, are the things by which we know the divine in the play. His divine becoming. This is the way he becomes many. With this too we shall aspire to identify ourselves. Towards this too we shall strive to rise. And then this last portion, we had read all this last time, but we now approach it differently. This last portion describes the passage in which we unite with him and in which his power of manifestation enters us and transforms. So we strive to rise, and when the period of effort is past, allow it, that is the divine becoming, the divine consciousness which is descending, allow it by our renunciation of all egoism to draw us up into itself in our being and to descend into us and embrace us in all our becoming. And this, in sum, describes the liberation and transformation, which is the aim of the integral yoga. The liberation is when our consciousness unites with the divine in being. But when that happens, the rest of us, our nature, and all the powers of consciousness, they may remain exactly as they are. But then, from that identification in being, that consciousness descends into us and embraces us in all our becoming. And as it embraces, of course, it makes everything in terms of itself. And there is the transformation. And then the last sentence summarizes the goal. This not only as a means of approach and passage to his supreme transcendence, but as the condition, even when we possess and are possessed by the transcendent, of a divine life in the manifestation of the cosmos. So this is important because this leads to the final goal. Where is all this leading to? In the traditional path, it is very simple. As you identify with the highest, you're absorbed and you eventually dissolve, abandoning the rest. The rest is irrelevant, ceases to exist for you, and it's gone. But here now we have brought all this into the domain of our goal to be realized. So there's too many things. Where are we? Are we here? Are we there? Are we in between? Are we moving back and forth? So this state where we are one in our being with the divine consciousness, and we're embraced and filled by the divine consciousness in our becoming, this condition, he says, is not only a means of approach and passage to his supreme transcendence, but the condition of the divine life in the manifestation. So the idea is this: you could look at all this. Oh yes, you have to become one with the divine consciousness has to fill you, divinize. But the traditionalist would say, what's the point of it? Eventually through it you have to go into some abandonment, into some dissolution. So what's the point? And Sri Aurobindo says, no, this is not only the passage through which we rise to the highest, but this is the condition in which we continue to participate in a divine life in the manifestation of the cosmos, even when we possess the transcendent and are possessed by it. So this now gives you the one status in which everything is held. This one status is there from the beginning in our journey upwards. It is also the one status which is held when we have reached the transcendent. It is also the one status when the transcendent fills us and transforms us. Throughout, there is this one status, which of course becomes more and more perfect. But there's one theme, one focus, which is the constant across the whole journey. And this is very important because this becomes now the overall object of the sadhana in the yoga of integral knowledge. It is integral knowledge because it is not only knowledge and identity with the divine in some transcendence, it is knowledge and identity with the divine in all of his manifestations, including his transcendence. And therefore, it is an integral knowledge. And the yoga itself, from the beginning, begins with an integral approach, and even in its culmination, is still holding the integrality of the experience. So this is the condition, this state of being one with the divine and filled and embraced by the divine becoming is the condition of a divine life in the manifestation of the cosmos, even when we possess and are possessed by the transcendent. It is also the means of approach and passage to the transcendence. And so this is the constant. And this is very important. Having come to this now, we step back and review how do we attain to this, and what is the meaning now of concentration and samadhi. These two terms we have seen how they were in the conventional sense, and this is what Sri Aurobindo now takes up in the next two paragraphs, which we will be broadly covering today. He says, in order that we may do this, that is, be this participation of a divine life, in order that we may do this, the terms concentration and samadhi must assume for us a richer and profound meaning. So, profound, of course, there's a deeper dimension to what is concentration. So far, we know concentration only as a focusing the mind into a narrow focus to get to something higher. We know samadhi only as an immersion and self-loss into some transcendence. But there's a deeper meaning to concentration, and we will see it is not just a mental focus. There is a deeper meaning to samadhi, and it is not only self-loss and transcendence, but also a richer meaning. There can be a concentration which is not an elimination of everything, but a concentration which is including everything. So that will be the richer dimension. Similarly, a samadhi, which is not the abandonment of universe and consciousness of universe, but which is including the consciousness of universe. So both these terms, richer and more profound, we will see how they come up. So for this, he steps back to review what we experience as concentration in the larger scheme of the whole cosmos. And there is a word which comes up, which is tapas. Tapas, we have seen before, is the gathering of the whole consciousness in an exclusive focus. And this is what he will describe in terms of the concentration. So let's first quickly read the text and then we will go well on what it means. All our concentration is merely an image of the divine tapas, by which the self dwells gathered in itself, by which it manifests within itself, by which it maintains and possesses its manifestation, by which it draws back from all manifestation into its supreme oneness. So, the four descriptions of what is the divine tapas. And all our concentration is only merely an image of this divine tapas, which has four facets to it. So we will first read another text and then come and look at this on both levels. What is our concentration as a reflection of this tapas, and then what is the tapas itself. So it is a text which I have referred to many times before. It is an article of Sri Aurobindo titled The First Rik of the Rig Veda, where he takes the first Rik, the first verse of the Rig Veda, and goes into it in depth, down to each word, root meaning, and so on. It is one of the most fascinating writings. So here he is discussing how the universe comes into being and the place of Agni, to whom the Rik is addressed. So, in describing the word Ritvijam from the first verse, he takes the root Vij. Agni is described as Ritvijam, and the Vij root, Sri Aurobindo describes as to shake, be troubled, excite, tremble, to be ecstatic, joyous, full of rapture, felicity, or ecstatic energy. And then he explains why Agni is described Ritvij. Agni, it has been pointed out, is the god of the tapas, or energy, at work disinterestedly on the intellectual plane. One of the highest gods working on the lower level in the service of the lower deity Indra. He proceeds straight from the Chit, which, when active, is known as Mahatapas or Chit Shakti, the energy of the essential intelligence of the Sat Brahman or Yajna or Vishnu. The Shakti begins creation by Kshobha or ecstatic vibration in the calm, Sadatman. And the ecstatic vibration or Vij goes out as speed, force, heat, or Agni, the basis of life and existence. This tapas, born of the Chit Shakti is Shakti, Devi, Kali, Prakriti, is full of the ecstatic movement of the Sat or Mahasatyam manifesting itself. For this reason, Agni is called Ritvij, vibrating ecstatic with the Satyam. For the same reason, he is called Jata Veda, he from whom the higher knowledge is born, because he holds in himself the Veda or Satyam and manifests it. Tapas is the basis of all concentration of Chit, awareness, the Samyama of Patanjali. And it is by Samyama or concentration of awareness, either on the object of awareness, Raja Yoga, or on itself, Jnana Yoga and Adhyatma Yoga, that Satyam and Veda become directly self-manifest and luminous to the yogin. So it's a very intricate, detailed text. I'm just reading it quickly. It's enough that we get a sense of it. You see, he's describing how from the divine creative Shakti, there is this vibration of delight going out in ecstasy, in speed, force, and heat. And this is the tapas, which is born from the divine creative force, from the divine mother herself. And this is the basis of all concentration of awareness. And by this concentration, the knowledge and the truth become directly experienced. And then he says, without the samyama, the concentration, no yoga is possible. No effective action of any kind is possible. When Brahma turned his mind to creation, it was the cry of tapas, tapas, that was heard on the waters of the Karana Samudra. This is the original creative consciousness. The immense importance of Agni as the Ritvij to the yogin therefore becomes manifest. And it is also clear why he is Purohitam Yajnasya, who stands before the divine. For it is the tapas which stands before the Satyam, which we reach before we can get the Sat. It is the Chit Shakti which takes us to the Sat, the Devi, Shakti or Kali, who brings us to Brahman, to Vasudeva. And Agni, her special agent for the tapas in the mind, is therefore a special intermediary between us and Yajna, who has been seen as is Vishnu, Vasudeva, or Brahman. So this places immediately the sequence, which now we will see reflected in the discussion here. The divine being, of course, in his transcendence, unreachable to us. In his manifestation, also the immensity is beyond us. What is it that mediates between us and the divine consciousness? His Shakti, his creative power, the divine mother, who is the divine pouring himself out as energy. And that energy is ecstatic, manifesting her bliss, his bliss. And the concentration by which he pours himself out is the original tapas, whose representation in us is the power of the mind to focus attention. And therefore, now you see how our mind is a tiny portion of the divine creative tapas by which the whole cosmos is made. When our mind begins to concentrate, we are only aligning ourselves with the focus, the creative energy focusing itself to manifest. And now you see why this connection is so important. Sri Aurobindo says, all our concentration is merely an image of the divine tapas. And the divine tapas, what is it doing? And he describes 4 things. The first is a general statement, and the other 3 are describing specific processes within the first. The divine tapas by which the self dwells gathered in itself. What does it do when it is gathered in itself? It manifests, by which it manifests within itself, by which it maintains and possesses its manifestation, by which it draws back from all manifestation into its supreme oneness. 3 functions. But all 3 are taking place in the first description. Self dwells gathered in itself. Now these 3 functions, you will see, immediately when you read this, it will bring to mind 3 deities, traditionally well known as Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. What is Brahma? We say, he who creates. What is Vishnu? He who sustains, maintains, possesses. And then Mahesh draws back from all manifestation into its supreme oneness, destroys in popular parlance. Creator, sustainer, destroyer. This is the way it is popularly presented in the Puranic tradition. But now you can see how actually all 3 movements are part of a single movement of self dwelling on self. So in this description of tapas, the divine tapas, there are 4 things. The first, which includes the other 3 within it as subsidiary. But essentially always it is this self dwelling on itself. When we try to think of it, first it is useful to experience in ourselves the reflection of our consciousness. So let's see how that works, and then we will extend it to something greater. When you're daydreaming, where are you? In my daydream. Where is the daydream happening? In myself. Where am I in the daydream? I'm in my daydream. Do you see what's happening? I am in my daydream, but the daydream is in me. It sounds contradictory, but actually it's the experience you have. The dream is taking place within me. At any point, I can choose to step out of it. On some level, I am above it, I am in control of it, and the whole thing is taking place inside me. So my consciousness at that point is like this embracing consciousness, closing, turning upon myself, looking in, and then what do I do inside me? I am enjoying myself. What is the daydream about? Finally, it is an experience of joy. What am I doing in the daydream? I'm creating. What? My story, my experience, my imagination, my possibilities of what I can be, what I could have been, what I could have done, what I might do, what I will do, what I want to do, or what I fear to do, whatever it is. All these possibilities are me, not manifest. In the daydream, I turn my consciousness on myself, closed within myself. I begin to draw out these possibilities. And so there is the creating. And then what do I do as I'm creating? I'm immersed in the enjoyment of the story unfolding, the possibilities playing. And the enjoyment guides this way, that way, this possibility. But what if that? I can go back and forth even. I can say, but if I did this, I move back to another possibility. But all the possibilities that I go back and forth are all there at the same time. And I enjoy their simultaneity. And so I maintain what I have created. I play in what I have created. I possess, enjoy as my creation. Okay. And then at some point where I tire of this particular play, I pull that back and bring something else forward and continue my exploration. So in my daydream, if I was a musician, I would do this and that and that. And when I have played with all these possibilities, but perhaps if I was not a musician and I became a scientist, and then I would do this and that, and the possibility of the musician is withdrawn as the other possibility comes forward, I'm still enjoying the immersion. You see, the creating and the destroying are not separate activities. I cannot new create unless what was before is absorbed at the same time. My absorption is only replacing one thing by another, the creating. Throughout, there is the continuity of my immersion, of my possession and enjoyment. So the creating, the sustaining, and the withdrawing or destroying are not three separate functions. They are a single function which have three facets, or a single experience which have three facets. And what is the single experience? I dwell in myself. Where am I? I am inside it, immersed in the daydream, and the daydream is taking place in me. I dwell in myself, inside, as well as embracing and holding. Exactly the same thing is happening in the divine consciousness. And that's why we can say that our consciousness, our concentration is merely an image of the divine tapas. In the divine self, one, indivisible, spaceless, timeless, ineffable, unknowable, indescribable. When he chooses to know himself, it is him dwelling on his own consciousness, on his own possibilities, his own being, and in his own delight. So you have the Sat, the being, I am, I exist, the consciousness, my awareness playing, drawing out these possibilities, and the delight of the whole play, the bliss. And this is the Satchidananda, when the one who is beyond space and time and limitation, utterly free, has his daydream of himself, in himself. So what is he doing? It is the self dwells gathered in itself. And in that daydream, all the possibilities of what he can be, of the play, are being drawn out, withdrawn, drawn out, withdrawn, sustained in a continuous flow. This is the universe, the birth of the universe, the manifestation of the universe. So where is the universe taking place? Where is it happening? All this where we are sitting? In him, in the oneness of the self. Who is playing all this out? He himself, having entered, enjoying this. What is all this made of? It is his own daydream, his own consciousness in which this plays out. And the purpose of the play is the continuous play of delight. And because at every moment something new emerges and the old fades away, you have this sense of unfolding of time. That's why the universe is never constant, it is never static. And because he is infinite potential, infinite possibility, and for the purpose of his delight he plays, therefore, nothing is ever brought out which was already there before. There's always something new and something new and something surprising, something unimaginable, always pushing limits, always going beyond limitations, always growing more, becoming more full, more complete, more joyous, more blissful, richer in variety and imagination and creativity. And this is happening in himself. This whole experience of the universe that we are seeing and experiencing with our little mind is nothing but the divine tapas, the self dwelling, gathered in itself. We are like a tiny point within the gathered concentration of the self. That point is our sense of I am, I exist, I know, I see, I experience. So this point is like a tiny ray or a fragment of a ray, the dot where the ray touches of the whole sun. The symbol we could take is of the sun as it is reflected in the waters. When the waters are shaken, flash, 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 sparkles of light. But the light is one, the sun is one. In the reflection, because of the agitation, you see these flashes. Each flash is our consciousness. The point where we say, I am conscious that I am. That is a fragment of that consciousness of the tapas of the Lord. And so when this fragment consciousness says, my consciousness is dispersed, I am lost, I have forgotten who I am, it is only the divine enjoying his self-loss and his daydream. And when this consciousness says, now I need to step back, observe my own life, and choose what I want to do, and it steps back and chooses freely to concentrate on one thing, then it is the same tapas of the divine consciousness which is dwelling on the whole cosmos, the ray, the fragment, the piece of that which steps out in the play to give a special focus of attention. So seen in this way, all our concentration is merely an image of the divine tapas. And what does the divine tapas do? By which the self dwells gathered in itself, in the daydream. And then the three facets of that gathered dwelling, by which it manifests within itself, by which it maintains and possesses its manifestation, by which it draws back from all manifestation into its supreme oneness. Everything comes out of the oneness, is maintained and played with in the oneness, and is withdrawn into the oneness. And it is always self-dwelling on itself, gathered. But you see, the gathering is a concentration. The whole self, in its totality, is fully concentrated on itself entirely, with nothing else, because there is nothing else. And it is a full focused concentration, one single concentration on itself in the daydream. But in the daydream, there's a whole variety and richness of possibilities, infinities, of all the galaxies, and all the billions of stars in all the galaxies, and all the billions of life forms on all the billions and trillions of planets. And each life's little focal point of consciousness, whether it is an amoeba or a consciously developed, evolved individual, and the journey of their lives and their struggles across lives, across time, all that are tiny variations of the one single concentration on himself. His concentration is one and single. Within his single concentration, there's an infinitely rich detail. But he is not lost in one versus another detail. He is held in holding the whole. As an image again, when you see a cinema projected on the screen, you may have 100 people or 1,000,000 people in the picture, but the screen on which the picture is held is one. The light which beams it is one. The picture frame through which the light goes to create this image is one. The appearance of 1,000,000 faces is a phenomenon inside the oneness. The concentration is still one single beam on one single backdrop of the self. There is nothing other than the one. So the nature of his tapas, the divine tapas, is a single concentration, not this and then this and then this and jumping all over the place. If you see the human character of concentration, let's say you're working at home, you're preparing food for lunch, there's a child who's asleep or who wakes up now. I'm cutting vegetables because after that I have to put it in the oil. Meanwhile, I have to set the oil on the heater. I have to make sure that the flame is steady, it's not too hot. And there's the water filling in the jug behind, and the child wakes up and calls, and I'm juggling between 10 different things, and suddenly the phone rings, and I keep the phone here, I hold the child in the other, and with the one hand I move the food so it doesn't get burnt. Where's my attention at that point? Jumping here, 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 here. I'm switching attention. At any point while I'm talking, I get immersed. Oh my God, is that what happened? I'm lost in that picture, and suddenly the smell hits me. Oh God, the food is burning. I switch back. But I'm not able to hold the whole as a single experience. The mind's capacity of concentration is to follow pieces and jump across pieces. And at any given point, if it focuses on one, it tends to forget the other. If it tries to hold the whole, you can do that. You can watch everything, stand back, you're unable to act. The moment you act, you get sucked into that thing on which you have put your attention and you lose the focus on the rest. So in practice, what we do, we enter action, hold, step back. View everything, which is the priority, we enter action, step back. The phone rings, I choose to ignore it now because something else is more important, I enter that action. Step back. So all our mental concentration goes in, out, and that's how we are able to handle a complexity. But the concentration of the self dwelling on itself is not entering separately on different things. It is one single concentration, like the daydream. When you're daydreaming, you are in a certain state. The whole drama unfolds, a story unfolds in your daydream. But in the daydream, even if you have many figures playing, you don't switch between figures. You are in a single experience unfolding. That's the closest we can come to in the daydream. But the daydream is not exactly that. In that consciousness, he is one with all things equally. Because all are himself, and he is indivisible in oneness. So the analogy of the cinema screen is better here. One light, one film, one screen, there is nowhere any division. The light equally focuses on the darkness as on the bright patch. The film only modulates the colors, the intensities, but the light equally shines to all things. The screen supports equally everything. At no point is there loss in one focus versus another. So for the self, it is a single concentration, fully involved, fully immersed in each detail. So Sri Aurobindo says in his aphorisms that the divine spends as much of himself to create a whole civilization, several hundred years, millions of people and all their activities, as he would spend to form a seashell. Tiny little thing, you might ignore it, step on it and crush it. But the divine has put as much of himself in that as in the whole civilization. The values of the self and the perspective of the self are very different. Everything is equally important. So in another poem, Sri Aurobindo puts it like this. The hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curl. And where is that curl? In the laugh of a boy, in the blush of a girl. The hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curl. A curl of the hair, a curl of the eyelashes. All the involvement there is equivalent to that power which sent Jupiter spinning through heaven. And all its cunning, not partial, a little bit here into this curl, a little bit in that curl, all of himself in this curl. And deliberately, Sri Aurobindo puts not only this comparison of size, Jupiter is massive. Just the diameter of Jupiter, you could have several dozens of Earths in it. Jupiter is almost like a miniature sun. And the power involved, sheer power. That power is included in this forming a curl, but here also there is the cunning involved in the curl to bring into it this very fine, subtle suggestion. And it all of himself pours into it. So the nature of the concentration of the self is not like the concentration of the mind's attention, which is fragmented and needs to switch. It is one single whole, pouring itself entirely on each tiniest detail and equally to each, never losing itself in exclusion, always holding the totality. And that's why our concentration has similarities to that divine tapas, but this is the difference. Now, this has extraordinary implications. One implication, because we are a part of this whole divine conscious concentration, of which we are like a fragment, a piece. Being a part of it, we are of the same nature of it in essence. And so we can go back into it and recover the experience of the divine concentration, the divine tapas. Okay? There's a continuity from that to this. Second, our concentration needing to jump across, moving in bits, as it moves back to recover that concentration of the oneness, the divine tapas, can hold the whole experience of life without needing to flip around. It can hold with full attention every single detail and still be holding it together from that status, expressed through this focal point of mind, perhaps. And so there's something very interesting, a possibility which comes here. When we realize that all our concentration is merely an image of the divine tapas, by which the self dwells gathered in itself, by which it manifests within itself, by which it maintains and possesses its manifestation, by which it draws back from all manifestation into its supreme oneness. Being, dwelling in consciousness upon itself for bliss, this is the divine tapas. The divine being, I am. Remember the first status of the indescribable when the divine chooses to know himself, I am. Being, dwelling in consciousness. What am I? Becoming conscious of all that I am infinitely, dwelling in consciousness upon itself for bliss, enjoying the whole movement of that dwelling for the drawing out of its infinite bliss. So infinite being, dwelling in infinite consciousness to unfold infinite bliss. That is the divine tapas. And this whole experience of universe, space, time, eternity, infinity, all through past, present, future, and all the galaxies and infinities are taking place within that divine tapas of being, dwelling in consciousness upon itself for bliss. Inside that, every single thing is fragment of, reflection of, partial expression of that one single being, consciousness, bliss. That's why in everything, underlying is a delight. Just to be is a delight. That's why we don't want to die, we don't want to quit the world, however painful it may seem. That is why everything is always growing towards greater awareness, greater consciousness, or participating in increasing possibilities of consciousness. And that is why everything exists, because that is being dwelling on himself. So the universe, you can now see how, in a kind of a very indirect, reflected, diluted way, the whole universe experience is a part, a surface, distorted experience of this divine tapas, of which this tiny consciousness, I am, I exist as a human mind, is a fragment, a flash. And he continues, and a knowledge will, dwelling in force of consciousness on itself and its manifestations, is the essence of the divine concentration, the yoga of the Lord of Yoga. Now you see, the whole thing connects with the passage we read earlier. Knowledge will, he puts them together with a hyphen, but capital, K capital, W capital. Knowledge will, dwelling in force of consciousness on itself and its manifestations, is the essence of the divine concentration. So the divine tapas is this whole massive experience. What is taking place inside the tapas is there's an awareness, I know, and in what I know, I will something to emerge, to draw out. So for example, let's go back to our example of the daydream. I am in my daydream. I know I could have been a musician. What would my life be like if I was a musician? And as I'm aware of my musicianness possibility, I draw out, will it into awareness by a force of awareness pushing and drawing to become manifest. Okay? So this is knowledge will. Knowledge will hyphenate it, because at that point, what I know and what I will to become in my knowing is a single experience. They're not separated. I know, and now I try to become. There's no trying. What I know, I become. You see how it works? In the normal experience outside my daydream, I know I should do this. I know I shouldn't eat that. I try not to eat it, but I can't. I have to eat it. Or I know I should finish this work. I try to do it, but I can't, because the will to do is not aligned to my knowledge of what I should do. Knowledge and will are separate functions. And sometimes the instinct of my will forces me to do something, and my knowledge says, no, 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 don't get angry. But the push of the will gets angry, and the knowledge says, don't. They're two different functions. But in my daydream, in the concentration of consciousness in itself, the two have not split. They become split when my consciousness is separate from the other consciousness. When my action is taking place within my consciousness and my consciousness is dwelling in myself, the two are still united. So I am the artist and I draw out the artist experience. But still there's a drawing out, an intention. So force of consciousness. So knowledge will, dwelling in force of consciousness on itself and its manifestations. So my knowledge will turns, I am artist, and I draw out my artist experience of life. If I was an artist, well, I would be doing this, I would be doing that. I would spend my days in this way. This is how I would relate to people. And all the manifestations come out. And there's a force of consciousness which brings it out. This is the essence of the divine consciousness, concentration. So the concentration process is this knowledge will dwelling and drawing out by a certain force. And this is also, he says, the yoga of the Lord of Yoga. Who is the Lord of Yoga? The divine yoga here, the drawing out of all the possibilities of his manifestation. Evolving, unfolding, revealing, creating towards a greater and greater completeness, greater perfection, greater expression of his own infinite possibilities. Who does it? The divine himself, as Lord of Yoga, does the yoga, and the yoga is this concentration drawing out by knowledge will. If you see this in terms of the divine tapas, exactly the same thing happens in us. When we make an effort to grow, and this is the essence of our yogic effort also, I am trying now, let's take a very overt example. I am trying to develop a skill to play an instrument. Let's say my fingers, I'm trying to learn the piano or the harmonium or the flute. My fingers don't function the way they should. I hear a piece of music, I can't quite imitate it. I try to blow the flute, I can't do it. I play the keys, it doesn't quite work. What do I do next? I concentrate my attention on the fingers. And then there is a force of concentration, there's a force of consciousness dwelling on my consciousness of the fingers, forcing my finger now to move the way they should. Okay? So drawing out a possibility which was always there. I know I can do it. But right now it's not overt. I draw it out by force of consciousness, knowledge, will, concentrating, drawing out, until in the will, the finger moves exactly as I want. And I'm able to do the movement like this, in sequence, in rhythm, and bit by bit, as the habit is now imprinted in the fingers, as I repeat, you see my consciousness draws back. And I observe my finger doing it. And then suddenly I get distracted. See, I'm doing it. Oh, sorry, I got it wrong. The moment I turn my attention away, the habit was not yet fixed. I lost. Again, I put my attention back. What is this force of consciousness going into it? By a will and a knowledge, imprinting what I will, to, which I know already, I will into action, in awareness, into manifestation, and then imprint it back. When I've done it long enough, the habit now is in the fingers, I can disengage and the fingers do it. So now I'm playing the tabla and I'm chatting with you at the same time. Not a problem. But that's because already the consciousness is separated, the finger consciousness is separate, my mind is separate. But at the point where I have to train, my mind had to get into this knowledge, will, force of consciousness, into manifestation, drawing out something which was there as a potential. Exactly this we do in any new learning, in any new training, in any new development, even in overcoming ourselves. In other words, yoga. When, as part of my discipline of yoga now, basic discipline, don't get angry, control yourself, have a basic control over your emotions, make an effort to be nice. These are basic things even before you begin yoga. So at that point, the urge of anger is coming, I will. So there are different parts working here, but still the same force of consciousness, concentrating, withholding a reaction, putting forward a very different response. I withhold the anger, draw it back until it is brought to some level of control, it's not gone. And then I bring out something calm, clear, positive. And instead of reacting in anger, I make a positive suggestion. Why not we try this? I'm still struggling with 2 or 3 movements, but what I did was withhold something, draw out something else. Where did I draw it out from? From within myself. The calm was already there, the clarity was there, the knowledge of the right action was there. But to draw it out, I needed a dwelling in force of consciousness on myself, in a level where it's knowledge will, what I know I am, and then draw it out until I become this. And exactly the same thing happens when in the yoga now I dwell in concentration to shift my state of consciousness. I am right now, let's say, very exteriorized. I'm completely dispersed in my senses. I want to recenter myself, gather my attention. I turn attention inwards, shift my center. But who is doing the shifting? I, by force of consciousness, dwelling on what I know I am already, and I pull back the center of my attention, come back to rest in my center. And now I'm in a different state. The same process I use to shift my state to a higher state of consciousness, to open to something deeper, to shift my relationship with the divine, put myself in a state of surrender, put myself in a state of aspiration, etc. And you can see how at the heart of any process of consciousness change, of drawing out a possibility, this is what is happening. The same thing happens when the divine consciousness works in us directly. The Lord of Yoga does the yoga. But by reflection, the same thing is happening when we, as a center of awareness, do the yoga to change ourselves. When I open myself to the Divine Shakti and say, Divine Mother, give me your peace, purify me, dissolve this habit of anger. And I invoke her peace and I feel her peace and force settling in my heart. She does exactly the same process. Her concentration, consciousness goes in, dissolves that knot of the anger by putting a force of concentration, force of consciousness with knowledge, will, dwelling in force of consciousness on itself and its manifestations. And the yoga of the Lord of Yoga is thus. So you see, this whole text, although when we first read it, you might have felt, oh, it is very abstract. It's not. It is describing things which are happening right here at every moment. But he holds it, Sri Aurobindo presents it at a level which is comprehensive. He describes it in its largest scope and then points out how this is a reflection of that, is a small part of that, an image of the divine tapas, and we can see the whole thing all the way down. But in a way, when I do nothing in life, I don't do sadhana, I don't do yoga, this is what the Lord of Yoga is still doing through me. And every time there's a challenge, every time I have to struggle to overcome the challenge, and I make the effort to overcome, this is exactly the process happening inside me. The challenge itself came up as part of his action. The overcoming within myself is also a part of his action, except it's all happening indirectly. I'm not conscious, I'm not deliberately doing it, and so it is a yoga by the Lord of Yoga, but it is a yoga unconscious. So the whole journey of life, Sri Aurobindo says, is an unconscious yoga of nature. And we won't even say here that it is Lord of Yoga doing the yoga, it is nature doing the yoga, because even Lord of Yoga is not known. Secretly, Lord of Yoga is doing the yoga, but overtly it seems to be nature struggling, overcoming herself. I'm just a part of that current of the ocean, little whirlpool inside the larger whirlpool of the larger whirlpool, unconscious. So Sri Aurobindo says all life is yoga, unconscious. The difference is, I now take responsibility, and my center of awareness, I who am conscious, takes charge. I now say, I don't like this response, I want to change myself, and I start this process of action. And at that point, it becomes not unconscious yoga of nature, but conscious yoga of my conscious individual awareness, which increasingly, as I open to the action of the divine force and invoke the Divine Mother to act in me, she acts more and more directly with my participation and support to begin with. And at that point, we can say the Lord of Yoga is beginning to act more and more directly. But even when I chose to say, I will do it, I will change myself, who is this I? I, the mental focus, am a reflection of that self. And so it is Lord of Yoga taking responsibility, taking charge indirectly. We've already moved out from unconscious yoga of nature to conscious yoga of individual effort. But increasingly, as I align myself to that, and in my consciousness grow and identify with more and more closely with the divine self, the Lord of Yoga directly begins to take charge. And exactly the same process is going on, more directly, more overtly, and therefore more rapidly and more completely. Secretly, though, it was always the Lord of Yoga, even when it was the unconscious yoga of nature. So Sri Aurobindo says, we start with the unconscious yoga of nature, and we grow to become the conscious yoga of the divine doing the yoga. You see, the divine doing the yoga in what? In the divine manifestation. And we come back to the big picture of the divine tapas by which the self dwells gathered in itself, being dwelling in consciousness upon itself for bliss. That is the divine tapas. That's what we have come back to when the yoga culminates. It is the divine doing yoga in the divine consciousness. Only in the beginning, in the unconscious yoga of nature, divine is concealed. Divine of the field in which the yoga takes place is concealed. So you have nature doing something unconsciously. Secretly, nature is divine. Secretly, the driver of nature's journey is divine, but it's all secret. So seen from another perspective, the whole journey of evolution, the whole journey of yoga is nothing but the divine hiding himself and gradually unfolding and revealing himself. And as he reveals himself, he by his own tapas hid himself. He by his own tapas gradually reveals himself, and that we call the journey of evolution. The universe is evolving, the universe is growing. I am one of the participants in that emergence, and to my own consciousness I am surprised. Oh, I didn't realize I am that. Even I discover myself in the journey. Who is that? The divine himself, who hid from himself, who forgot he is that, now recovers himself and says, oh, I am that. What a beautiful game. So we can see the whole journey of the unfolding experience is only a game of hide and seek and the Leela. All of these are simultaneous truths. We see from a perspective, it's all a game. It's the play of delight of the divine child. Sri Aurobindo puts it something like this. All this universe is a divine child playing a divine game in a divine garden. Something like that, he says. At the same time, there is also this struggle, overcoming challenges at every point. And so it's a battle. Things oppose, things help, things go against, things fail, and all the time we are fighting, struggling. At the same time, through it all, we are growing towards something. So it's a journey. And all these are simultaneous. You can't just take one and say this is all. It's all these things. That's why the whole universe is a multifaceted experience. It is, in terms of a technical term, a manifold. And you can see it from each of these angles and say this is all, but actually none of those are all. Until you have the full experience, you don't have the all. And the full experience is when you recover the divine tapas. And all our concentration is merely an image of the divine tapas. But it is the way by which we are going to recover our status of experiencing the whole and participating in the divine tapas. So all this gives us a background now. We understand the place of our individual concentration in the divine tapas, the journey of our life, our effort, and the whole psychology of the sadhana. We reread this text and now you see how it captures all this in a very simple, brief phrasing. All our concentration is merely an image of the divine tapas, by which the self dwells gathered in itself, by which it manifests within itself, by which it maintains and possesses its manifestation, by which it draws back from all manifestation into its supreme oneness. Being, dwelling in consciousness upon itself for bliss, this is the divine tapas. And a knowledge will, dwelling in force of consciousness on itself and its manifestations, is the essence of the divine concentration, the yoga of the Lord of Yoga. This, of course, is described in the consciousness of oneness, the big picture. In our consciousness, of course, we see separate pieces. Even I am made of separate pieces of consciousness. So now he brings it to this level. Given the self-differentiation of the divine in which we dwell, so in our consciousness, each thing is separate. Although behind it is all the same, one divine consciousness, one concentration, one tapas, we see all these separately. Given the self-differentiation of the divine in which we dwell, concentration is the means by which the individual soul identifies itself and enters into any form, state, or psychological self-manifestation, bhava, of the self. So very simply, everything is essentially self and part of the divine tapas. As an individual soul, concentration is the means by which I identify myself with anything, with any form, with any state, or any psychological self-manifestation of the self. But all forms are forms of the self. All states are states of the self. All the self-manifestations are of the self. So by concentration, I align myself with any one of these, what appears to me as separate fragments or appearances of the self. So by concentration, I focus on the flower until I experience oneness with the flower and the knowledge of the flower's medicinal properties and its biological processes and needs. Or by concentration, I shift my state. I bring calm and peace in my heart, which was troubled and upset. By concentration, I make my mind silent. But the state of silence of mind or heart is also an aspect of self, a state of self, as was the state of agitation, one of its plays. Or psychological self manifestation. I draw out a possibility from myself which was not before. I bring forward courage, which I didn't have before. And now, with this state of courage, I jump from a height into the water. I overcome my fear of the body. So, all of these are still states of self drawn out or brought into experience by identification through concentration. So, concentration is the means by which the individual soul identifies itself with and enters into any form, state, or psychological self-manifestation. All of these are of self. Sri Aurobindo uses the word bhava in parenthesis. And bhava is the psychological self-manifestation. Bhava we loosely translate as mood or state. Everything, all possibilities, all experiences are colors, moods of the one self. And I can enter any one of them. When a musician has to sing, you catch anybody, even a child, and say, please sing this. You sing it so beautifully. The first thing the person will do, whether it is a child or this expert musician, concentrate. Meaning what? His attention and consciousness was dispersed, comes back to center, focuses. And then, often they'll close their eyes because the concentration is a shifting into some state which is familiar but not currently accessed. I shift myself to that state in which and from which now I'm able to draw out that music in the beautiful way in which you like it. If I don't shift myself and draw from there, what I bring out is, oh, you have a nice voice. It was nice. I didn't have that experience which I have when you sing. So it shifts to that state where the experience is held, and now the music is a form in which that experience flows. And at that moment, when I'm fully in, I forget myself. I forget you. I've forgotten the world. I'm one with that in an exclusive concentration. And then from there, when I start singing or chanting, it brings out that experience, gives it that form. But that state to which I went, from which the whole thing came out, is the psychological self-manifestation, bhava, of the self, form, state, or bhava of the self that is drawn out. Now, if this is what we use concentration for, and we can use it to identify with anything, to enter into anything, what do we use it for now? What will we use it for? To use this means for unification with the divine is the condition for the attainment of divine knowledge and the principle of all yoga of knowledge. So you want to get knowledge, the divine knowledge. What do we mean by divine knowledge? Complete, perfect, flawless, richly integrated, integral, knowledge, without any error, without any ignorance, without any limitation, without any distortion or bias, the way the divine knows himself and the universe. To be able to have that knowledge, to attain divine knowledge, the condition is unify with the divine. The process is this means of concentration. It's very simple, it's very obvious. And it's the principle of all yoga of knowledge. So, how do we do that concentration? How do we concentrate on the divine? Where is the divine? You see, when I concentrated on my state within me, I knew that state, therefore I could concentrate to get back to it. When I have to jump from the 5 meters into the water, I lack the courage. I fear, my body shivers. I will myself into a state of courage which is new to me. And yet, before I got to it, I knew it is possible for me to do it. If I didn't know it was possible, I wouldn't even be able to make the effort. So when I know something is possible, I focus on the idea of what I know is possible. And then through the gateway of the idea, I get to the thing of which the idea is a representation. Right? If you have to jump across, let's say you're on a trek and there is a crack on the ground. It's a deep thing going down 2 or 3 meters. But the gap itself is half a meter perhaps. Can you jump half a meter? Here on the floor you can do it easily. But when you look down that deep ravine, the gorge, the fear, the body pulls back. I know in the mind it's half a meter, I can jump easily. But my body is afraid. What do? I shift myself into a state where the knowledge that I can do is brought forward until I become one with it. And at that point, the fear is gone because I am what I know, and then I jump and I don't miss. But if at that moment somebody pushes me and forces me to jump by fear, I will very likely fumble, slip, and fall, or lose my balance somewhere because I'm not in the state where my knowledge is my identity. So when I know a state already, having done it once, tomorrow I come back to that same situation. Oh yes, I can do it. I shift myself. I still take a few moments to bring that state of courage, overcoming the fear, and I jump. Having done it 3 or 4 times, now the habit stays and the state of courage, at least in that situation, is normal. I don't need to make a special effort. I have changed permanently. The fear is overcome, or at least of that thing. But still there was initially this drawing out process until it became permanent. But having done it once, it's familiar, I recall and draw out. But the first time when I don't have it, what do? I rest on the idea of being able to do it. And the idea itself has a certain touch of, yes, I know I can do it, but wait, give me a few minutes. Let me overcome myself. And there's a concentration on the idea and through the idea to the thing of which the idea is the conviction. And this is what Sri Aurobindo says now. Exactly the same process we follow to realize the divine. Where is the divine? I don't know the divine. I've never experienced divine consciousness, cosmic consciousness, the tapas of the divine. It's outside my domain of experience. But my idea of tapas of the divine, idea of infinity, idea of divine, idea of Satchidananda is itself the gateway through which I can touch that the same way as I did for my courage. So Sri Aurobindo says, this concentration, the concentration by which we will unify with the divine, this concentration proceeds by the idea, capital I, using thought, form, and name as keys, which yield up to the concentrating mind the truth that lies concealed behind all thought, form, and name. For it is through the idea that the mental being rises beyond all expression to that which is expressed, to that of which the idea itself is only the instrument. By concentration upon the idea, the mental existence, which at present we are, breaks open the barrier of our mentality and arrives at the state of consciousness, the state of being, the state of power of conscious being, and bliss of conscious being. to which the idea corresponds, and of which it is the symbol, movement, and rhythm. Concentration by the idea is then only a means, a key to open to us the superconscient planes of our existence. A certain self-gathered state of our whole existence lifted into that superconscient truth, unity and infinity of self-aware, self-blissful existence is the aim and the culmination. And that is the meaning we shall give to the term samadhi. So I've read very quickly, but you now get the big picture. And now we can dwell on the parts of the big picture. So when we go all the way in this way to that state where we have it, that will be the samadhi. But in between is this process of passing through the idea. And the idea itself is a symbol of that. The key for the idea is thought, form, and name, which yields to the concentrating mind the truth which lies behind, concealed behind the thought, form, and name. So, idea with a capital I, and then thought, form, and name, which are the keys. So, we'll just dwell upon this. When you have to jump across that gap, and you have to overcome the fear, what is it that you're concentrating on when you gather yourself to make the jump? In your mind, you have an idea of the state you will be in, full of courage, without fear, and then you jump. But that idea was not a mental idea. It was an experience idea. So that's why we put capital I. An idea which is itself the thing which you are seeking. A mental idea is a different thing. I have an idea. And now let me find the words for it. Let me work to make it actual. It is a mental form of a thought. I am not that. But this idea, the idea of my courage, overcoming this fear, the idea of my being able to cross over it and jump safely, correctly, that idea has a character of being experience which I am identified with. It's not just a mental idea, it has something much more behind. So that's why he puts a capital I. Of this idea, there are components. There is a thought, I can do it, is a thought. There's a form, I see my legs stretching out, pushing, jumping across. And then there is a name, jump. Or there is a state and a name to the state, courage, fearlessness. So people will tell me, don't be afraid, jump. So these are the names. The names trigger in me a certain picture. I am without fear, I am like this. I jump, I see this form of my legs spreading, leaping. I see myself landing on the other side, smiling, jubilant, having conquered this. And then there is the thought, which is more abstract, of being able to do it. And all of these are keys, entry points, facets on a lower level of form of the thing which is the idea behind I can do, I'm capable. But the idea itself, he says, is only a representation of the truth behind the idea. And what is the truth? The truth is, I can overcome everything. I'm articulating it in terms of this idea, I can overcome this. I can be courageous and overcome this. But the truth behind is, I am free to do anything, to overcome anything. Given enough time, given enough training, there's nothing which I cannot do. Of that greater truth, you can take a lesser truth. I can overcome this situation. Of that, there is the idea that I can overcome my fear and jump. And of that, there are these three keys of name, form, thought. We can see the same thing in a different way, but we'll keep that for next time. For now, we are entering an understanding of this first. So, this concentration proceeds by the idea using thought, form, and name as keys, which yield up to the concentrating mind the truth that lies behind all thought, form, and name. So it's still at that point, you have to concentrate on the idea through concentration on the name or the form or the thought. I concentrate on the thought, but then I get to the idea, and at some point, the thing which is behind that comes in. The concentration helped me to cut through that. So he says, for it is through the idea that the mental being rises beyond all expression to that which is expressed. Every time that we express something, here the expression is an action. In a different situation, the expression would be the music which I sing or the thing which I write. But the expression has behind it something which is expressed. That thing you cannot capture with words. It is more an experience. Wordless, but known in experience. And we pass through the word, through the idea, to that thing which is behind. For the mind, especially, the gateway is through idea. For the heart, it may be love, it may be devotion. But mind has to know, and through knowledge it has to enter. So idea, for the mental being, is the gate through which we rise beyond expression to that which is expressed. To that of which the idea itself is only the instrument. So we're already discussing something which is outside, beyond idea, of which idea is an instrument and vehicle. That something is what we want to get to. That something, when expressed, is what helps us to overcome. That something expressed is the yoga, the growth, the progress, the manifestation. But idea is the device through which the mind is entering in relation with that something. Later, we will find, he will explain how to get to that something and then be in it directly. At that point, you will not need idea as a gateway. You will not use mind as your vehicle to get to that. You will be that itself. And from there, the concentration will go, it will do. The difference is this. When somebody says, oh no, you should do this, you should do this, you respond, I will try. The moment you say try, implied in try is, but I might not succeed. When you are filled with the conviction, it comes from within you, I have to overcome, you say, I will do it. You see the difference in the quality of consciousness. I say, I will try, let me see, I will do. The conviction, certainty, which is in that consciousness, when you live in it, you see, you do. There's no try. And the doing is perfect, is accurate, flawless. There's a story from Sri Aurobindo's life where we are told by one of his colleagues at that time, later disciple, in the freedom struggle, that some of them were training to use the gun, and they were trying to aim at a matchstick from a distance. And that was part of the training. They were trying, failing. And then someone told Sri Aurobindo, can you do it? So Sri Aurobindo took the gun and blam, one shot, he hit the match head. He'd never picked up a gun before. There's another incident from the life of Swami Vivekananda when he was traveling in the US. He was taken to, it must have been a fair, I don't know what it was. They had many floating balls in the water. And the exercise was to take this gun and to aim and shoot one after another. And so people were trying to aim, missing, hitting, missing. Then finally somebody asked Swamiji, would you like to try? So he took the gun and went bang, 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 each one flawlessly in a series, finished it. And they were astounded. You must have practiced a lot. Where have you used a gun before? And he says, no, it's the first time that I used it. When the action emerges from that consciousness, it has this certainty, this flawlessness, this perfection. Of course, an action like this would be possible when the mind and even the nerves and the body are sufficiently aligned with that consciousness. Otherwise, there's a loss in translation. And that's why there's this whole process of preparing the instrument. But still, when the consciousness lives in that thing, you don't need the idea, you don't need the concentration, you are in concentration. A single, effortless, spontaneous concentration. So concentration right now for us from the mind is a way to reach that and access that briefly for some outcome. But eventually, as he will point out, we have to ascend and be one with that state, with that consciousness. And then that is itself an effortless state of concentration. Except it does not require this kind of narrowing, gathering, or effort. It is what you are. But right now we understand the relationship and the way to get to it through the idea, which is a gateway. By concentration upon the idea, the mental existence which at present we are, later you will become that existence. Right now we are mental existence. The mental existence which we are at present breaks open the barrier of our mentality and arrives at the state of consciousness, the state of being, the state of power of conscious being and bliss of conscious being, to which the idea corresponds and of which it is the symbol, movement, and rhythm. So being a mental being, we need the idea to get to that thing. What that thing is, we will see again, to arrive at that. But the idea is used, is concentrated upon, and by concentration, we break open the barrier of our mentality. In other words, this mentality in which we are is our limitation. The thing which is beyond that is our perfection. And this barrier of limitation has to be broken. And the way to break it is the concentration. The direction for breaking it is the idea. Idea is the gateway, concentration is the means to cut through. By concentration upon the idea, the mental existence which at present we are breaks open the barrier of our mentality and arrives at that. What is that? And it describes by a series of statements. Arrives at the state of consciousness, the state of being, the state of power of conscious being, and bliss of conscious being, to which the idea corresponds. Now, these are 4 descriptors of that thing to which the idea corresponds. Now, in this case, the idea could be the idea of the divine, and then you get to these 4 things of the divine. But otherwise, the same thing would apply. Would have to jump across this gap. The idea of being able to jump, the idea of overcoming by fear and limitation, will still get me to these 4 facets of that corresponding to the idea. I am now a gymnast, and I am going to do a perfect somersault, which I have never done before. And so I have to again to access that by the idea of being able to do the perfect somersault, my idea of a perfect somersault, and through the concentration on that, in this case now, of course, the body has to be drawn into it. I get to these 4 things of that which make this somersault perfect. I want now to gain knowledge. Knowledge of this flower and its medicinal properties. And again, the idea of that knowledge of the medicinal properties of the flower is the gateway. By concentration, I enter, I break through, and I get it. So the mother describes this experience when she was in Japan. And I think it was in the springtime, the cherry blossoms blooming. And she said, when she concentrated on the cherry blossom revealed to her all its medicinal uses, precisely for the illnesses which come in springtime. It's very interesting the way nature has organized these things. We were high up in the mountains of Peru, at a level where people have altitude sickness. I think it was 12,000 feet, something like that. Already people had breathing difficulties. We were carrying a can of oxygen in case someone got breathless. And we had a Native American, Lakota. He pointed to a plant there, growing on that height. Not many trees grow there. He pointed to that plant and said, This is exactly the plant which is used by the people of that place for thinning the blood. The problem is at that height, because the air pressure is lower and the blood is still of the same habit of the body at the lower levels, it is too thick, too sticky. It has to become thinner to be able to flow smoothly when the air pressure is lower. You eat this plant or chew on the leaf, and it has the effect of thinning your blood. In any given situation of the world, the things which are the problem there, nature provides you exactly the counterbalance, the correction for those problems for that situation. In a hot climate, in the hot season of summer, she will give you the watermelon. And in winter, when you need the cold, she will give you the fruits or vegetables which heat up the body. I'm going out of this description, but as an aside, I forgot the chain because why I went into this. So we come back to the description that knowledge, oh yeah, it started with the knowledge of the flower. Everywhere in nature, every plant, every fruit, every herb, every flower has a medicinal power. By concentrating on the flower, your consciousness breaking through the idea, breaking through the limitation of the mind through the gateway of the idea, by power of concentration, identifies with flower, and I know the flower reveals everything. Exactly how it should be used, down to precise details. Even it can give you precise knowledge. Take these petals, dry them in this way, boil it in the water for so long, add to it these things in this proportion, and you will cure this illness. Down to that level, precise formulas can be revealed in that identity of knowledge. Because in the identity, the knowledge is held at that level, in tune with the divine creative tapas, where all the possibilities of unfolding are known. So you get to this flower, and all the possibilities of the flower's use and role in the universe are held there in that one identity. So, what do we arrive at? Arrives at state of consciousness. So when I concentrate on the flower, I come to state of consciousness, that is the flower. And then through that, I experience myself one with the flower. So, state of being, I am flower. So because we went through the mind, the first thing you experience is the awareness, the consciousness. And then through the consciousness, you get into identity, being. Then from being, there is the power of flower to become. Okay, so the next step is state of power of conscious being. When flower knows itself to be this flower, what is the power of its conscious being which emanates? And finally, bliss of conscious being, the joy. Why does it radiate this power, these qualities, these attributes? Because that is the joy which flows to become this state, this power, this consciousness, this being, the bliss of the original concentration of the divine. So this is the sequence in which we enter these things. Of course, it is possible in the first touch, one of these hits first. The joy, the bliss touches you. Well, it's rare. Generally, you experience the consciousness first, and then the being, and then the power of conscious being, and then the bliss of conscious being, to which the idea corresponds. So the idea could have been the flower and its medicinal powers. It could be my capacity to leap. And notice what happens when I focus on the capacity to leap. I become conscious. I feel the courage. I am courage, being, and then power of conscious being. I can overcome. And then the joy, the delight of conscious being, and I leap. And you see that when I leap, I smile. Or when I complete, I have the exultation, I did it. But that comes in the last stage. But always you'll find these things follow when we take the concentration to its completeness. Exactly the same thing happens when we concentrate on the divine. First, we experience the consciousness of the divine, the vastness, the peace, the light, and the knowledge, the being, the density, the infinity, the solidity, immensity, the power from there, the power of that, and then from there, the bliss of that. So Sri Aurobindo puts it often in these terms, in sequence. When you open to the divine consciousness, peace, light, power, knowledge, ananda. Sometimes he changes the sequence, but you see all these are implied here. When you enter in the divine consciousness, also there are degrees on each of these. I experience something of the divine consciousness, something of its vastness, something of its freedom. At first, I just feel light, I feel free, I feel happy. That's just a touch of that. But as you go deeper and deeper, these are the things which unfold until you have the whole, to which the idea corresponds, and of which it, the idea, is the symbol, movement, and rhythm. So from that consciousness, the idea is the symbol, movement, and rhythm. Briefly, we touch upon it. We will elaborate next time. Symbol we can understand because it is like a mental idea of something which is not mental. But the movement, because in the idea is a possibility of expression. So from there, it moves to idea to manifest. In a way, it reduces, narrows, limits itself, but as part of a movement to manifest in the world. And rhythm, because whatever is one, indivisible, infinite, timeless, cannot take form limited, or space limited, or appearance in time which is limited. It cannot take those unless it is part of a process of appearance and a process of disappearance. And so there's a rhythm. Anything which is outside form, space, time, when it enters form, space, and time, needs a point of appearance and a point of a disappearance. And if it can appear and disappear, it will keep appearing and disappearing, and there's always a rhythm. So this flower appeared at some point, but once it has appeared, it keeps blooming. And then there's the rhythm of this flower's journey. There is the rhythm of the species blooming together in springtime. There is the rhythm of its cycle of opening and closing with the night and with the day and the night, and so on. All these rhythms are when that one formless, spaceless, timeless potential moves into time, space, and form. There's always a rhythm. So you see how accurate and complete this description is. To which the idea corresponds, and of which it, the idea, is the symbol, movement, and rhythm. Concentration by the idea is then only a means, a key to open to us the superconscient planes of our existence. All those regions above idea are superconscient to us. We are not conscious of it now, but we can become conscious and live in it. And concentration is the way to do that. A key to open to us the superconscient planes of our existence. So the rest, when we enter that and are immersed in it, that is samadhi. So this we will take up again next time, this last part, and dwell on some finer nuances of it. And later in the chapter, he tells us how to do it. And he discusses the process of concentration and meditation by which we can attain to this and live in it permanently. So we pause here now, and just perhaps a few minutes we can take up any questions or any comments, anything you want to share. It's a very dense text when you first read it, but when you get into it in detail, you find it is very accessible and very practical. And the beauty of Sri Aurobindo's description is that because he catches things in their essence, we see the application from the highest to the lowest and most mundane part of our life. There's a continuity. In fact, based on this whole description, we can develop any training program. The method of training to learn a new skill, to develop a new capacity, to overcome some incapacity. If you follow the logic of this, you will see how you can easily develop a system which follows this, and you can get to it very quickly, very easily. But the highest use, the highest application will be, of course, to know that by knowing which everything is known. So we pause here for today, and we will continue next Friday.